Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm one of your hosts, Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann. And today we are thrilled to welcome a legendary songwriter, music producer, author of Me, the Mob, and the Music, One Hell of a Ride with Tommy James and the Shondells, and singer of some of the most iconic rock songs of all time with 23 gold singles, 9 platinum albums, and over 100 million records sold worldwide. Please help us welcome Tommy James. Tommy, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. How are you?
Great, great. Happy that you're here. Big fans.
Good to see you.
Yeah, well, to start with, I was reading the autobiography. Again, me, the Mob, and the Music. And you started getting into music really young. Was your family very musically oriented?
I just started. I started playing guitar when I was 9 years old. And since I was 4, and basically when I was 9, I got my first guitar, and I just started learning. This is 1956, right. And I started learning everything I could on the radio. So the following year, I got an electric guitar, and when I was 10 years old, and I just began playing everything I could. And singing. I basically wanted to, I did play guitar to accompany myself. So when I was 12 years old, I started my first band, and we started, a little cover band called Tornadoes. And we started playing around locally in my little hometown of Niles, Michigan. And honestly, it seemed very normal to me. All I ever wanted to be was one of those rock and roll guys, and anyway, I don't mean to be getting so long-winded, but that really is how it began. And I started. Well, I worked in a record shop. I got a job in a record store when I was 14, and I was able to promote my band. It was called the Spin It Record Shop in Niles, and one of the one-stop distributors had a little record label, and he asked if we would record a few songs. So we
the record
did.
Store had its own label?
Pardon me?
The record store had its own label?
Oh, no, this was a one-stop distributor that would come in and deliver records. So we recorded a song called Long Ponytail, and of course, it did absolutely nothing, but we had a record, and we went on the local jukeboxes, and we just were big fish in a small pond. And a couple of years later, another little label, approached me and asked if it was a disc jockey in Niles, and asked if we would record some songs for him. Well, one of the 4 songs we recorded turned out to be our first hit record, Hanky Panky. Mm-hmm. And but that's a whole other story. So anyway, that's how I got into it, and to be continued. So if I talk about it any longer, it's going to eat up the whole half hour here. So.
Well, we have a lot of questions. So let's see here. So who were some of your influences?
Well, of course, my main influences when I was growing up was the first generation rock and rollers. I'm talking about Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and Chuck Berry and Little Richard and all the guys, all the dangerous rock and rollers that were out at the time. And later on, of course, when I was older, when I was in high school, it was the British invasion and the Beatles and the Stones and that. But starting out for me were the first generation rock and rollers, Gene Vincent, Buddy Holly, Eddie Cochran, those guys. And that's how it was for me.
Well, now you just mentioned Hanky Panky. So how did it start getting offers? You started getting offers from record companies based on that?
Yeah, well, basically what happened, I recorded Hanky Panky when I was a sophomore in high school. I was 16. And we recorded it in a WNIL in my hometown, Niles, Michigan.
Mhm.
And the record came out and was, did okay locally, but we had no distribution. So eventually the record kind of died. So we forgot about the record. And in 1965, I graduated from high school and took my band on the road, and we played club April of '66. Right in the middle of the 2 weeks I was playing this dumpy little club in Wisconsin, and right in the middle of it, the IRS shut the guy down for not paying his taxes. So we got sent home, feeling like dogs. And but that's how the good Lord works, because as soon as I got home, I got a call from Pittsburgh that changed my life. It seems that some people in Pittsburgh at the radio station and the local distributors were playing this record, Hanky Panky, that I had made almost 3 years before, and started selling records, and they bootlegged them. We are sitting at #1 in the city of Pittsburgh. And so that just flipped me out. I couldn't believe it, only in America. And so I got asked to come to Pittsburgh and do some local TV and radio, which I did, and picked up the first group I could find to be the Shondells. We had changed our name to the Shondells, and I couldn't put the original band back together. So I picked up my first manager in Pittsburgh, and sure enough, the record was #1. And I went to about 2 weeks later to sell them. We ended up on Roulette Records at that point. And so it was just like stair steps. One thing led to another, led to another, led to another, and just a series of miracles. And Roulette Records then took us nationally, and Hanky Panky ended up going #1 in the nation. So it was just that kind of weird story that happened back in the '60s. And today that could never happen, but it happened back then.
Well,
and,
you mentioned Roulette
God answered my prayers.
Well, you mentioned Roulette Records, and in the book you talk about Roulette and Morris Levy. Now, at the time, did you know about Levy's connections to the mob, or you found out later?
No, I found out considerably later. Basically, what happened was when I went to New York, we had a regional breakout in the trade papers with Hanky Panky.
Mhm.
And so when I went we got a yes from Columbia, we got a yes from RCA, from Atlantic, from Kama Sutra Records, Epic. And the last place we took the record to was Roulette. And, I'd heard some stories about Roulette, but basically I didn't care. I just wanted to hit record. So I went to bed that night feeling great. We stayed at a hotel in New York, and I went to bed feeling like we were probably going to be with one of the corporate labels, Atlantic or CBS, somebody important. And so the next morning, about 10 o'clock, we started getting calls from all the labels that had said yes the day before. And now they're saying, listen, Tom, we got to pass. And what's going on? I thought we had a deal. And finally, Jerry Wexler up at Atlantic Records told us the truth, that Morris Levy, the head of Roulette Records, called all the other labels that had said yes and scared him to death. Said, "This is my record, back off."
Oh my God.
And they did.
Wow.
And so we were apparently going to be on Roulette Records. And that's literally how it happened. It was the first offer I couldn't refuse.
Oh, good grief. I mean, that's like straight out of the movie. Good grief.
Yeah.
Well, what was Morris Levy like? I mean, I'm getting a sense of what he's like from that story, but personality wise, what was he like?
Well, I went up later that day to meet Morris Levy. And as you said, it was right out of a movie. He was a big, intimidating gangster, basically. And, he talked like this. And when you shook hands with him, it was like grabbing hold of a catcher's mitt. His hands were that big. He was about 6'3", 6'4", and weighed probably, I don't know, 260 tracks right away. And I did not realize who we were rubbing shoulders with until a few weeks later. And, I'd meet somebody up in Morris's office, and a couple of weeks later, I'd see him taken out of a warehouse in New Jersey and handcuffed by the FBI. And I'd say, isn't that the guy we just met up at Morris's office? And of course it would be. And that sort of thing kept happening. And then all these people, these famous gangsters that I would see on TV would be hanging out in Morris's office. And they'd be coming up and we'd recognize people. And so it got kind of scary. And finally, we just realized we needed to keep our mouth shut and just go with the flow. So that's what we did.
Now, your book was so incredibly fascinating. I recommend everyone buys it. So Roulette Records, it was really, back then, was basically what you said was a front for the Genovese crime family. So you estimate that through the years, they stole around $30 to $40 million from you in royalties?
That's basically what we figured.
Oh my gosh.
It was hard to get an accurate number, of course. But we had this very tumultuous and scary relationship with Roulette. If I'd have been older and smarter, I'd have probably been more scared. But
yeah,
I was pretty young and stupid, so I just kind of went with it. Really, what happened is I started realizing over time what was going on. Morris Levy's secretary, Karen, who Morris trusted a lot, told me basically what was going on, that this was the Genovese family, and that she'd point out this one or that one and tell me who they were and what their position in the thing was. Morris was not Morris was Jewish, of course, so he wasn't a made man, as they say, but he was what they called an associate. And they used Roulette Records as a front, and by that I mean they were doing all kinds of illegal activities there. They were, of course, there was the standard, record corruption and all that, but basically they were using bank accounts to launder money. They were, heavily involved in loan sharking and all kinds of racketeering. And, and so the bottom line was that there was some scary stuff going on that we couldn't talk about. When Martin Fitzpatrick, my co-author, and I started writing this book, we got about a third of the way into it. We were going to write a book and call it Crimson and Clover. And we were going to talk about the hits. We were going to talk about making records and writing songs and all that stuff. It would have been interesting. But we got about a third of the way into it and realized that if we don't tell the Roulette story, that we're really cheating ourselves and everybody else, because that really is the story.
Yeah.
And it's the story that people would find the most interesting. But I was very nervous about finishing the thing and bringing up all the names and talking about real people in the real world.
I get it.
So, because some of these guys were still walking around. So we sort of put the book on the shelf for a couple of years. And then we waited, I waited for the last of the Roulette regulars to die, basically, to pass on, before I felt comfortable really finishing the book, which we did. And in '06, the last of them pretty much passed on. And I was very careful to not overstate or understate anything. I really wanted to be accurate, and I wanted to tell the story the way it actually happened. And so we did. And as soon as we finished the book, Martin and I finished the book, we started getting offers for the movie rights and the Broadway rights. And so we're moving ahead with all that stuff right now. And so I was just amazed at how the public received the book. I mean, the excitement was genuine. It's been going on for years now. The book keeps selling almost like it was an album. And so we've just been really pleased with the reaction from the public and the reviewers and guys like you.
I mean, that is absolutely amazing. And yet with all of that craziness that you're dealing with, you still credit them for all your success.
Well, it's true. The odd part about all this is that every time I go to say something really negative or really bad about Morris and Roulette, I sort of got to stop myself, because if it wasn't for Morris Levy, there wouldn't have been a Tommy James. And honestly, that's the truth. And I have such mixed feelings about all this, because I really owe them an incredible amount. We had 23 gold singles on Roulette. I wouldn't have had a career without Morris Levy. So, I owe him a great deal, and I try to say so in the book.
I think you do. I do think that you do. I think that comes across. Now, I read all these things that the character from The Sopranos, Hesh Rabkin, is based on him. Do you think that portrayal is accurate?
I do.
Yeah.
Hesh, his his real name was Moishe, but his nickname was Moish, Moish, Moish. And Hesh from The Sopranos was basically Moish from real life. The Jewish record promoter with the horse farm. That's all Morris Levy.
Oh God! Well, did he ever threaten you personally?
Yeah.
Oh my God!
It was. We had a real blowout in 1971, 72, and I told him I was leaving. He says, "You ain't going anywhere." And yes, I mean, it was kind of scary. That would have been the scariest moment, I guess.
Sure.
But the thing of it is, it was made very clear to us that we weren't getting paid. Crime doesn't pay. So it was made abundantly clear that we better not push it too far. We weren't going to get mechanical royalties. We weren't going to get our publishing monies. Now, we were making a lot of money from touring and from writing and BMI and stuff like that. But we weren't. Jimmy Rogers, what happened to Jimmy Rogers could have very easily happened to us. Jimmy was a big artist in the 50s, had Honeycomb and Kiss It Sweeter Than Wine and several hits on Roulette. And he didn't get paid either. And So he kept suing him. And so one day in 1966, I believe it was, some people pulled him over claiming to be cops on an LA freeway and beat the hell out of him and left him for dead. And, he survived, but just barely. And of course, it was later learned that those were mob guys that were after him. And Morris Levy was the source of that. So we certainly didn't want to get in any scrapes like that. So basically, we kept our cool and just kind of went with it because, first of all, we were having great success. And honestly, if we had gone with one of the corporate labels that we could have gone with, I can tell you right now, we would have been lucky to have been a one-hit wonder with it, especially with a record like Hanky Panky. And, we would have been turned over to an in-house A&R guy, and that's probably the last time anybody would have heard from us. At Roulette, they actually needed us. They hadn't had a hit in 2-3 years. And really, from a creative standpoint, they did anything I wanted. From a creative standpoint, it couldn't have been better. We were, I was given endless budgets to go in and make record. I could bring in anybody I want into the team. It really was fantastic at a creative level. I learned the business. I learned how to make records. I learned how to write songs and produce records. And that would have never happened anywhere else. We would have been very dominated by in-house people. And the competition would have been, if we'd have been at Columbia, for example, can you imagine what the competition would have been?
Yeah.
There were so many acts there. At Roulette, we were it. So in the end, I think we made the right decision to just keep our mouth shut and stay there. Then I get to write the book. I get to tell the story.
Yeah, that's the ultimate payoff for sure. I mean, yeah.
Well, we want to ask about some of your hits. Like I mentioned at the beginning, many of your hits have become such iconic songs. I want to start with one of my favorites, Crimson and Clover. To me, it has one of the best openings of any song ever. It's been covered by so many people, Prince, Joan Jett, Cher. How did that song come about?
Well, basically, just was trying to come up with interesting combination of words for titles. And so I just was playing with the letter C and came up with Crimson and Clover. And I had no idea what it meant. It just sounded profound, and that's really how it happened. We wrote 2 different versions of Crimson, 3 different versions of Crimson and Clover before we settled on the one that ended up being the record. And it was probably, next to my first hit, Hanky Panky, the most important record I ever made, because Crimson and Clover, first of all, we began producing our own records at that point, without and writing, producing, and playing on our own records without any outside. So it was important at a creative level, but it was also right in the middle of that period of time when the music industry went from singles to albums, and there was this mass extinction of singles acts right at the end of 1968. In the summer of '68, the big acts were the Rascals, the Association, Gary Puckett, all singles acts, all singles acts. By the end of 1968, it was all albums. It was Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Led Zeppelin, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, Joe Cocker. I could go on and on. And we realized we were on the Humphrey campaign during the last half of 1968 with Hubert Humphrey. We were out with the vice president who was running for president. And when we got back off the campaign, it was all albums. When we left in August, it was all singles. So what I'm saying is that the industry turned on its head in about 90 days. And we realized that if we can't sell albums, and we never had before, we'd sell our share, but we were basically a singles acts. And we realized that if we couldn't sell albums, our career was probably over. Probably would have ended with Mony Mony. And it just so happened we were working on Crimson and Clover at that moment. And Crimson and Clover allowed us to make that switch from AM top 40 singles to FM progressive album rock. We started legitimately selling albums at that point. And I can't think of any other single we ever did that would have allowed us to make that jump in one shot like that. And then Hubert Humphrey ended up doing the liner notes to the album. It was a wild, wild record. The whole album was and then we ended up with 3 big singles from the album. You know, Crimson and Clover, Crystal Blue Persuasion, and Do Something to Me. So that was a very, very important record for us. And it ended up being our biggest single.
Well, you mentioned Mony Mony. It's, of course, everyone's favorite party song. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, we made that earlier that year, and in the spring of '68. And basically, I was just trying to do a throwback party rock record, you know, a la Mitch Ryder or Gary U.S. Bonds, you know. And so we just went in the studio and just started laying down this goofy 3-chord track. And we worked on it for about 6 weeks. And, you know, putting this little thing over here and that little thing over there, all things that were, you know, it sounded live, all of those things that I loved about party rock that put people on the dance floor. So, you know, that's how it came about. We literally were not trying to do anything sophisticated. We were trying to do something very amateur sounding and unsophisticated, and it worked. Ended up being, you know, and then, but what was really kind of the moment in the record that really was important was that Richie Cordell, my songwriting partner, and I were at my apartment in New York, and it was the night before I was supposed to do the lead vocal, and we still had no title, no working title. And, you know, we had the lyrics and, you know, sort of nonsensical lyrics, but we needed a 2-syllable girl's name. And, you know, like a Sloopy or Mony Mony or something. And everything we came up with sounded so dumb. So in disgust, we throw our guitars down. We go out on my terrace in my apartment, light up a cigarette, and both of us are just kind of looking up in the night sky. And the first thing our eyes fall on is the Mutual of New York Insurance Company sign with the you know, MONY, you know, which was like a bad spelling of money, and with the dollar sign in the middle of the O, and it gave you the time and the temperature, and we both just started laughing. We both saw it at the same time, and we're both looking at each other, pointing. Just perfect. And I've often said if we'd have been looking in the other direction, we might have called it Hotel Taft. That's how desperate for a title we were. Anyway, that really is what happened, and that became the title of the song.
Now, you famously
True story.
No, that's amazing. You famously turned down playing at Woodstock. So I want to know what went into that decision, and were you told ahead of time what other acts had agreed to be there?
Well, no, we what happened was we were in Honolulu at the time. We were in Hawaii, and we had like 2 weeks off. We had two concert dates, one in Hilo and one in Honolulu 2 weeks later. So in that 2 week time, the promoter put us up at this magnificent Spanish villa at the foot of Diamond Head. And so we were the most expensive piece of property in the United States, probably, and right on the ocean. And so I get this call from my secretary in New York, Joanne, who says, listen, Artie Kornfeld was up this week, and they asked if you would come up and play this pig farm in upstate New York. I said, what? That's how it was put to me. Yeah, well, she said, Artie said it's going to be a big gig, and it's going to be a lot of people there. And I said, you want me to fly 6,000 miles, leave paradise, and play a pig farm? That's perfect. So listen, I'll tell you, if I'm not there, start without me, okay? And I hung up the phone. And about 3 days later, on Friday, when they shut down the New York freeway, we knew we screwed up really bad.
Oh.
And so anyway, we missed Woodstock. And they called it Woodstock, and we weren't there. We could have been, but you know, I probably over the years have gotten more mileage out of the story than I would by playing the gig. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I love about these kinds of stories, because you're absolutely right, and you basically answer our next question, which was, you know, did you, once you realize what it had become, did you regret the decision? I mean,
well, we did, and
yeah.
to a certain degree, I still do. But years later, by the way, about 5 years ago, we played Woodstock. We played up at the amphitheater that they have built up there, and I told this story to there's about, I don't know, about 10,000 people there. I told this story of missing Woodstock, and we just got here. The traffic was murder. So anyway.
Yeah. No, your memoir, which we mentioned, and you mentioned, like I said, it's fascinating reading. And you mentioned that it's being made into a movie and Broadway show. What's the status with that? Because I've been reading about that for a while, and I've been waiting, anticipating.
Sure. Well, as you know, Hollywood was shut down for 2 years during COVID, and it still pretty much is. But producers, Barbara DeFina, who produced Goodfellas, produced Casino, produced Hugo, and with Martin Scorsese, used to be married to Martin Scorsese, as a matter of fact. So she produced just a string of great hit movies, and so we're very honored and flattered that she's going to produce our film. And it's being directed by Kathleen Marshall, who is a terrific director, actually made her bones on Broadway, and is doing movies now. She's really a sensational director. And by the way, after the movie gets filmed, they want to do a musical on Broadway of this, so it's going to be great. And then Matthew Stone did the screenplay and did a beautiful job. So next they're going to be casting, and the financing is almost completely there now. And so all of these things, I'm getting a hell of an education because I'm going to be co-producing.
Wow.
And so all of these elements are coming together, and it's really fascinating watching all this happen. But let's hope it gets out within our lifetimes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned casting.
It's gonna. I think it's gonna. I think rock and roll and the mob together, you really can't beat it.
No, I don't.
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely.
It sounds like it's going to be a fun movie. And one of the things that's really interesting is that, the two main characters, Morris Levy and myself, and so we got to find people that are perfect, that really put it across. And I'm amazed today how many of the young actors started out in rock bands. It's incredible, who can play guitar and sing and all that stuff. And so it's going to be interesting, who we get for the two main characters. And that's going to make all the difference.
Well, speaking of that, do you have any thoughts about who you'd like to see playing you?
Yes. Walter Brennan, I think, would be good. No, I got to leave this to the grown-ups.
I got you.
Yeah. These casting directors today are really very hip, and they know all the young actors out there, and there's so many good young actors, and then the Morris Levy character is the one that's the most fascinating to me, because he's really the one everybody else is dancing around. Morris Levy's got to be right, and we have some ideas, and it's got to be right. And it's interesting because you don't want somebody that everybody has seen 100 times.
Sure.
You need to have somebody that's kind of unknown, but yet good box office, but also scary. And so there are many things that the Morris Levy character really has to be. And so finding the right guy, well, that's going to be up to the producer and the director and the casting director. These casting directors are very hip, the young ones. And like I said, I'm watching this whole thing come together and loving it.
Must be fascinating for you. Now, your songs have been covered so many times. I was reading on your site over 300 times. Now, the two particular stand out, like in the 80s when Billy Idol was doing, Mony Mony, and Tiffany was doing I Think We're Alone Now. How surreal was it to see two of your hits being covered and competing against each other for the top spot in the charts?
It was amazing. As a matter of fact, when those two records came out, my wife and I were flying to LA, and she happens to have a Billboard magazine, and she shows me how Billy Idol doing Mony Mony and Tiffany doing I Think We're Alone Now had just come out. They came out the same week. They both got reviewed, and then they went up the charts week after week like they were holding hands. And in the end, both of them went number one. One was number. I think Mony Mony went number one first, and I Think We're Alone Now was number two, and then the next week they switched, and just that had never happened before. And I am so flattered when other artists do our material. I really am. I'm very honored, and it's always so interesting to hear how other artists interpret your music.
Sure.
Dolly Parton did an incredible version of
cool.
Crimson and Clover, and actually I was on the record with her. I sang some background, played a little guitar, and it was fun. But REM did an incredible version of Dragging the Line that was in the Austin Powers movie, The Spy Who Shagged Me. And Prince did a magnificent version of Crimson and Clover, and it was so futuristic, and I would have never thought to do it that way, honestly. And I was very honored by that. And there's so many great versions of Mony Mony and I Think We're Alone. They're all over the place, and over 300 now. And so I'm very honored and flattered when other artists do our stuff. Keeps the songs in front of people.
Yes.
Too.
I also love Cher's version of Crimson and Clover. I thought she does a great job with that one too.
Who was it?
Cher.
Cher, yes. she did it with her son.
Right, yeah, great version of that one as well.
Right. And that was a great version. You're right.
Now, I have to ask, you've been voted into several Music Hall of Fames, New Jersey, Las Vegas, and others. And when I was doing the research on you, it is mind-boggling to me that you're not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's incomprehensible with so many hits. Have you heard anything on that front?
Well, thank you for saying that. But my view is that, when it's our turn, we'll go. And that really is how I feel. And, when I'd like it to happen, honestly, I would love it to happen when the movie comes out.
No.
I think that would be a great 1-2 punch.
Sure. That would be good. And speaking of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I watched the video with so many times. You did Crimson and Clover with Joan Jett, Miley Cyrus, Dave Grohl. It's such a great. How much fun was that to do?
That was incredible. 3 generations of rock and rollers doing the same song. Actually 4 generations, if you boil it down. That was just a real kick. Joan called me and asked if I would do the Hall of Fame when she was with her when she was getting inducted. And Paul McCartney was there that night. We had a nice talk, and Stevie Wonder was there. I mean, I really got a chance to meet people I would have never met any other way. And then, but the highlight, of course, was doing Crimson and Clover with Joan and Miley and Dave Grohl, and it was just really a kick in the head. I loved it, and it's one of the moments that I will cherish for a very long time.
How much fun to watch! Yeah.
Wow. And so you host your own show on SiriusXM radio. Sorry, I stumbled over that. Can you tell us something about that?
This is our 5th year.
Oh, wow.
And when they came to me with the offer, I was a little nervous about it because I'd never really worked that side of the mic before. And there's so much involved. They wanted me to do 3 hours, from 5 to 8 on Sunday. And that's a lot of time to fill.
Oh, yeah.
And it really is an eternity when you're in radio. So I said, yes, hell yes, I want to do it. That's great. A huge audience, all of North America and all of Canada. And now everywhere in the world, because through the app, you can be online and everywhere, every country in the world now. You can be on the air every week. And during COVID, it was a great opportunity to stay in touch with the fans while you couldn't do concerts. So it was great. But the philosophy of the show basically is that there was so much music made in the 1960s that never got on the air. There was no room for it. There was just so much music produced that the competition was endless. So in addition to playing the hits, we do, of course, the backstories to so many of the records that you already know. But then I get a chance to play some rarities and music that I love that should have been hits and weren't. So I get to, and they said, Tom, play anything you like. I said, really? Anything? It's anything you want. In fact, play a lot of your own music. I said, can I go to jail for that or something? And they said, nah, play your stuff too. So basically what I did was I try to make it interesting, and we divide the show up into little segments and sets. And I am having a ball doing this. We've done it for for 5 years now. And it's every Sunday on Channel 73, 60s Gold, it's called. And I play everything I like. I play they basically allow me to do whatever I want, and I'm so grateful for that. So it's called Getting Together, and it's fun.
It's fun listening to, by the way, as well. I've listened many a time. So,
Thank you.
Speaking of playing your hits, are there any plans for a tour in the near future, and in particular in Florida? So,
We are touring every year. We're touring right now, as a matter of fact. I don't go. I refuse to go out for like months at a time.
right.
So we're doing one-nighters right now during touring season, and you know, if you come to our website, TommyJames.com, or our Facebook page, Tommy James and the Shondells, you can see everywhere we're playing. And
I hope you make it down to South Florida. So that's
yeah, well, in Florida, now I'm not going to be in Florida till I think it's March. I think it's March 9th. Anyway, it's March of next year. We're going to be in just outside of Naples.
oh, fantastic. Okay.
And we're going to be doing the Strawberry Festival down there
And I will be there.
at Plant City. That's the name of the
Yes.
town, Plant City, Florida.
Fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, and Jonathan will be there for sure.
Yes.
I guarantee it. But real quickly, aside from being an amazing musical artist that managed to survive the mob, what do you feel is your legacy in music history?
Oh God. Well, look, I just would like to the way the fans and I got along. The fans have been so good to me. The good Lord and the fans have been responsible for the kind of longevity I've had, and I've been so lucky in my life. Honestly, I've had so many little miracles happen. They kept this time. I can't believe we're talking about what 56 years, and in the big leagues. And I am so grateful. God gave me the desire in my heart, and rock and roll was it. I don't know what else I can say. It really is the truth. I'm very, very honored, flattered, and grateful for it all.
Oh, that's great. Tommy, we want to thank you so much for coming today, because we're both huge fans and we've been looking forward to this. And you're welcome back anytime. Anything
Thank
that you
you.
want to come on, we'd love to have you, because really this was an absolute pleasure for us.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you guys for all your support and hard work. I appreciate it. And I hope to see you soon.
I hope so. Again, this has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen with Ike Eisenmann. And again, a very special thanks to Tommy James. And please subscribe.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.